Our first presenter will be Marianne Stam from the California Department of Justice Laboratory System. She is presenting on behalf of Helen Griffin, who was unable to attend at the last minute. And her presentation will be about communicating conclusions and customer feedback. Our second presenter will be Cornelia Nesse, who is a forensic scientist with the Forensic Scientists Institute in Germany, and she will discuss the European viewpoint regarding report writing. And our third presenter will be Mike Smith with the FBI laboratory that will present on the UK court case decision regarding the interpretations and conclusions. So I'll go pass it on to Marianne.
Thank you. Today I'm presenting on behalf of Ellen Griffin. I got this at the last minute, so I apologize if I stumble here and there and hopefully don't make too many errors for Helen. This is a talk that, that Helen prepared on communicating conclusions. So basically, here's the history behind conclusions. Helen wrote that there have been attempts to establish databases that allow for some type of statistical data, especially with glass evidence. The problems, however, not just with glass, but with others, involve how rapidly a population of manufactured materials changes, how difficult it is to obtain manufacturing data, and how much the distribution of manufactured data can actually vary from one location to another. So basically, even without statistics, conclusions have different weights based on whether the comparison involves class characteristics or class plus individualizing characteristics, the quantity and quality of the evidence, and also the commonality of the evidence in the environment. In addition, in the absence of statistics, a scale allows for conclusions that express a level of either certainty or uncertainty. And scales have been constructed for documents. There's an ASTM document E1658, AFTI, swig gun, swig tread, and swigget, and the working group marks from Europe have actually come up with scales for conclusions. Unfortunately, the scales for the same wording can mean different things. And an example of this is the ASTM documents terminology for inconclusive says 0 point of the confidence scale. Swig tread's inconclusive says some similarities noted, however, significant limiting factors that do not permit a specific association. AFTI's inconclusive has 3 different meanings. The first one says some agreement in individual and class characteristics, but insufficient for identification. The second one is agreements in class characteristics without agreement or disagreement of individual characteristics. And the third one is the agreement of class characteristics and disagreement of individual characteristics, but they're insufficient for elimination. So Christopher Bomarito's scale was introduced at the 2009 TRACE Symposium, in which he provided a definition for each confidence level that he gives for his interpretations, and these are provided in a report. And even with different scales in this case, there can be no confusion if you have your definition in a report. So what Helen's group did was they set up a survey, and they wanted to see which different populations that they surveyed would prefer either the old style of wording, which was used prior to 2009, that she defines as style 1, that includes categories identified, probably associated, could be associated or associated with another similar source, not eliminated, neither identified or eliminated, or eliminated. And for this style 1, that was used prior to 2009, there was no key provided in the report to distinguish what these various degrees of association meant. And then in the survey format, they provided style 2, which was wording used after 2009, and it basically included some of the similar aspects of strengths of conclusion, which you can see here, from identified to very strong support all the way down to inconclusive and eliminated. And this wording that she based her 2009 or the format on for style 2 is based on work done by the European Working Group on marks to attempt to standardize report wording for footwear impression examinations. And they have a scale committee of the NSFE EWG marks group, which was established in the 3rd European meeting for shoe print and tool mark examiners in Sweden in 1999. And the main goal of the conclusion scale committee was to produce a conclusion scale that would enable practitioners to understand the meaning of the conclusions formed by examiners across Europe, taking into account the different legal jurisdictional regions. So essentially providing a standardized form of communicating across the board. And it was meant to be used with cooperative footwear tests for the group, the European Working Group. So for the trace evidence conclusion scale, we have the scale that includes identification with its definition. Another added scale that the Ventura County Sheriff's Office added to their scale was very strong support. Strong support, moderately strong, moderate, limited. And basically, the Ventura County Sheriff's Office Forensic Sciences Lab trace section had used the working group mark scale in some reports prior to 2009, including 8 levels. But in 2009, after Christopher Bomarito introduced his conclusion scale that actually defined each level, they adopted a modified version of the working group mark scale to include definitions. So they combined Christopher Bomarito's idea with the working group marks scale. And with the addition of one more level, which was important and introduced by Chris Bomarito, because it's considered important to actually add this, because trace evidence can involve many things that include or come close to an identification in strength, but is based solely on class characteristics. So for their survey, they actually presented a hypothetical. And in this hypothetical, they had green fibers that were on a nail. They had a sweatshirt that was green, and and it was 80% cotton and 20% polyester. They provided the hypothetical as having been examined microscopically for various features, FTIR, and microspectrometry for the color comparison. And the fibers from the nail and from the sweatshirt were similar in all characteristics, including blend comparison. So then they presented in their survey the conclusions. Style 1, the fibers from the nail originated either from the green sweatshirt worn by the suspect or from another source of similar green polyester cotton fabric. So that was the old style that they used to use. Style 2, which was a newer style, is the following similarities provide moderately strong support that the fibers on the nail originated from the green sweatshirt, and these properties include optical properties, fluorescence, thickness, cross-sectional shape, chemical composition, blend, composition, and color. So style 2 would actually be included in the entire, in the report with a definition of the scales. So the feedback they got from the report writing survey was the following. When they polled law enforcement, style 2 is in yellow and style 1 is in blue. You can see for law enforcement to the left, prosecutors, then public defenders, then jurors. All of them pretty much favored overall style 2, which is the new method of including the definitions and having the scale of conclusions. For law enforcement, they only had eight responses, which is 25%, 6 of which 75% of these responses preferred style 2. And some of the comments included easier to digest and understand. However, there were other comments too from law enforcement that included style 1 is easier to use to draw other connections in the case, easier for a jury to form their own conclusions based on the evidence and the scientist's testimony, and for style 2, it has a great degree of subjectivity to the conclusion. However, overall, law enforcement preferred the old style. Prosecutors, on the other hand, there were 12 responses, and 9, which is 75%, preferred style 2. However, of the 5 major crimes prosecutors that responded, 3 strongly preferred style 1. And they got some interesting feedback on why. So the prosecutor preferring style 1 said that style 2 gives the defense way too much room for argument that will just confuse the jury. Moderately strong support only falls in the middle of the conclusion scale. All of those categories above moderately strong support offer the defense almost countless ways to disqualify the evidence. Other comments were, we deal with only one relevant standard beyond a reasonable doubt. To use other language when the lab analyst offers her level of conviction for her conclusion on a particular item of evidence is at minimum confusing and at maximum undermining of the standard the prosecutor is trying to reach. Other comments were that moderately strong support is not proof of beyond a reasonable doubt. And we will argue corroboration, but the wording trying to quantify weakens the appeal of our case. Public defenders, on the other hand, there was only one response, but they preferred style 2. They said it provided more detailed information without the conclusory language which invades the province of the jury. The jury pool, on the other hand, there were 6 responses, and all 6 of them preferred style 2. They said the conclusion scale adds a nearly essential component to the interpretation for the jury member. It allows the juror a much greater grasp of the importance of the information and how it relates to other information presented in the case. So in summary, although the majority of our clients preferred style 2, a persistent comment was that the could have originated from wording was actually easier to understand. So in post-survey discussions, since the reported objective is to determine if the fibers on the nail could have originated from the sweatshirt, Ventura County decided to include this wording in the conclusion, and as follows. The following similarities provide moderately strong support that the fibers on the nail could have originated from the green sweatshirt. And that's it. Helen invites your questions, your comments, and here's Helen's email. So, thank you.